Hello and welcome to another Stamp Out Spiking podcast, giving victims a platform to speak openly on their experiences. Please be aware that this podcast involves topics around sexual assault, so listeners' discretion is advised. Today we'll be chatting to a victim who was spiked and as a result sexually assaulted. We will be discussing topics such as misogyny, sexist culture, and the part it plays within this horrendous crime. Hi Jess, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you start off by sharing your story about your experience with being spiked?
Hiya, hello. It happened about 4.5 years ago. And I'd been out shopping for my son's birthday. And I was on my way home and I had all my shopping bags with me, and I've got other children, so I was like, I couldn't be bothered to cook. So I thought, right, I'll grab a pizza and Domino's. And the pub's next door, and I'll have a Coke in the pub and put my shopping bags down, wait for the pizza, get the pizza and walk home. And I got a drink at the pub, got a half Coke at the bar, put it down and put my shopping bags down and said to a group of people, just watch my drink a second, would you? I'm just nipping to the toilet. And it wasn't late. It was about 7 o'clock at night. It wasn't late at all. They were just it was around Christmas time. It was a week before Christmas, so the pub was busy. It was very, very busy. I came back, drank my drink, and the next thing I know, I'm being dropped on my doorstep. It must have been about 3-4 o'clock in the morning. I got dropped on my doorstep with all my shopping was dropped with me as well. And then it didn't really. I couldn't get in the front door. My son had to. I was banging. I couldn't even bang on the front door. I was all over the place. And my son's bedroom's at the front of the house, and he heard the commotion of me at the door. And he opened the door and got me in. And I can remember being intoxicated. From the moment of being in the pub to being on the doorstep, I don't really have flashback memories of things that happened that I put together and what happened, but I don't have a timeline at all, apart from being put on my doorstep and my purse had been gone through, my driver's license, it was upside down in my wallet, so they must have looked in my wallet, seen my driver's license. My son got me in, and I got to bed, and I woke up in the morning, and I hadn't been drinking. I hadn't been drinking in quite a while. That's what I know it's happened. So to wake up with a hangover and all over the place, and I couldn't quite realise, didn't know what had happened. I didn't know. I kind of could smell sex on me. I could smell. I could feel, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And it took my son was really concerned, so I had to calm my son down more than deal with myself. And it took a good day to work out what had happened with me, and it took longer to piece it all together. But after about 24 hours, I thought, right, I did phone the police, and I was on hold to 101 for, I think it was over an hour. I was on hold, and then when I finally got hold of someone, I was told it was historic, and it was because it had happened more than 20. But I think it might have been 48 hours. And I was told that I could do nothing about it. And so I kind of carried on from there. But it was in my local community. And worked out who it was. I know who it was. I actually know the people that did it to me. And I live in the local community, and nothing's been done about it. And it's quite prolific in the local community. I found out after that, the recollection was just, then I went to the sexual health clinic, obviously, and got myself all checked out and that as well, but that was an experience in itself. The way I was kind of treated was a bit weird, a bit strange. Well, I'm 43, I've gone to the back clinic loads of times. Just because, you've got to look after your sexual health if you're sexually active. And it was just a very strange way of being treated. Not like I was blamed. And I'm going, well, I was out Christmas shopping. I was dressed like a school teacher.
Yeah.
I wasn't even drinking. I didn't ask for this to happen to me. I didn't, and I was very, very, very strange behaviour from the women in the clinic. Yeah, but that's what happened.
This is the thing, isn't it? Like, there's such a stigma around spiking, and people assume that it only happens in clubs, it only happens to young people. But there's evidence here, obviously, from your story, which I'm so sorry that this happened to you, that anyone is a victim. And, even you going out as a mother to the pub, you yourself then became a victim. And I think, obviously this is why we need to educate and make people more aware of, this is happening to every type of person. It's not just a certain, it's not happening in just clubs, not happening in just bars, like you say, just in your local community where you thought you were safe, you yourself became a victim. This is what I wanted to ask you about, is obviously toxic masculinity and lad culture is a very concerning topic, especially around drink spiking. How important do you think it is for men to be calling out other men on their behaviours?
I actually say to you, it's actually one of the main points that I wanted to bring up. Really needs this culture of like, oh, he's just a lad, or he's just doing this, or he's just, and they'll stand there and still have a pint with him. They'll stand there and still, and you know what that person's doing. Why don't they call them out? Why don't they stand up to him? I just don't understand it. Is it fear? Is it whatever? But don't they understand? It could be their daughter. It could be their mum.
Yeah.
They're in disgrace. I don't think they. I think they might target, but I think it can be quite an haphazard kind of crime of someone that looks a bit vulnerable, or they'll do that. But yeah, I don't quite understand why men won't stand up to other men, and I think it's time it started happening to be quite,
It brings the question, doesn't it, whether, as a stand buyer, if you're seeing it happening, does it make you as bad as the predator because you're viewing it and you're not doing anything about it? It definitely raises those questions, doesn't it? And I think with society, people rely on feminists and women to be calling out these behaviours. And, there's people thinking, oh, they're overly sensitive, they're this, they're that. But it's more about, having men being able to call out other men, especially in friendship groups, rather than egging it on and supporting it. Because, in situations like, unfortunately, yourself, could this have, prevented this happening?
So I think that the scale of it as well is I think everyone kind of must know are wrong. And, I didn't shut up about what happened to me because it was so local, and I'm known in my community. And it felt very like a personal attack on me, to be honest. And I was quite vocal about it. And I was like, and I pointed these people out once I knew who it was, once I'd pieced it all together and got confirmation. No one wanted to know. Everyone no one wanted to know. And then a couple of other women were like, yeah, it happened to me. Yeah, it happened to me. My place is known for it. And I'm like, what the fuck? It's known for it, and no one's doing anything about it. No one's standing up to these people. No one's actually doing anything. And I actually went to the local community builder, and they didn't want to know either. They didn't do anything about it. I was like, what the hell is going on here? It's just crazy.
It's this whole thing about blaming the victim, isn't it? And this is why, there's so many victims out there that are scared to come forward and scared of reporting it because of them not being believed or them being blamed. It's such a negative thing that, we really need to change and inform people about, isn't it?
Well, I think it's once it's like, oh, they were intoxicated, it's your own fault. But I thought it meant that when you're intoxicated, you're in no fit state to consent to
Yeah.
anything. I thought that's where the law stood on that one. But you don't get treated like that.
Yeah.
You don't. You get blamed. You don't actually get like a victim of this has happened to you. And it was the shame from it. The actual physical shame, the brutality of it. I've been sexually assaulted before, and at least in a weird way, at least I know what happened.
Yeah.
I was present in the moment. When you don't have a clue and you've just got all the physical signs of everything, and it's just, and you can feel it, but you don't know what happened. I think your mind just goes into overdrive.
That's the thing with spiking. There's so many layers to it, isn't it? You've got the spiking part, you've got the assault, also just somebody going through your personal things and being disorientated. There's so many layers to it. Like, how are you meant to comprehend or even emotionally deal with this situation?
Well, they know where I live. They dumped me on the doorstep. Dumped me on the doorstep, man. So they knew where I lived with my fucking shopping. So it was, it's like, what the actual, and I don't think there's definitely not enough education with it. And how the hell is this drug getting about?
Yeah.
How is it getting about in such, because there's quite a few different drugs, but it's easier. I feel it's easier with a liquid than it is a tablet. More to spike somewhere with a liquid in a drink than trying to crush up a tablet. Where the fuck is it coming from? Who is it that's selling it to these people? It's not a recreational drug.
Yeah.
That's not something you do all this together and go, let's just put it together. Where's it coming from?
Well, that's the scary thing, isn't it? Because, again, talking about stigmas, when we think about spiking, we think, oh, drink spiking. But actually, there's so many more forms of it. Obviously, there's needle spiking. I spoke to a lady the other day that was spiked through a vape, through food, and people don't know that alcohol is also a drug. If you buy somebody a double and they want a single, like that's a form of spiking. So I totally agree with you that there's this lack of education that people aren't aware of the different forms of spiking.
It's not taken seriously, and if you do to court, I've got another story of something that happened to me, but I thought one at a time is probably a good one. And I actually did go to prosecute this person because I found out that he'd been doing it to other people as well. And that's what prompted me to do it. It totally destroyed my life, absolutely. And then a couple of years later, the other thing that happened to me. I went to the police, and the police knew who he was. He was doing it, but they just didn't have enough evidence. They didn't prosecute. But we all got a payout from the criminal prosecution sentence. So they admitted it on one sense, but wouldn't prosecute the guy. I'd rather the guy was in jail than a couple of grand. But,
This brings me on to my other point. I don't know if you've seen, but Stamp Out Spiking are campaigning for this new law to be in place so that spiking is recognised as a crime in itself. So at the moment, if you're assaulted and spiked, the assault will be recognised as the crime, but the spiking actually won't. So if somebody reported spiking on its own, they would not prosecute it as a crime. And this is something that they're trying to fight for, to get it recognised as a crime as it should be. Do you think this is important?
Yeah, it should be a murder charge. It should be. If you don't know if that person's going to have a reaction, you don't know what that drug's going to do to somebody, that one extra mil is going to stop their heart. Never mind the consequences of what you're actually doing when they're passed out. It should be tried as murder, spiking. Pure and simple. You don't know what's going to happen. I think it's a good point. Whether or not it will happen, whether or not they'll take that seriously with everything that's going on. It doesn't seem to be right at the top of the charts, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talk about how you're a mother. How important do you think it is to educate young people on this? Do you think that this is something that should be implemented, in schools or maybe even universities on spiking and just how to treat people around you?
I've got my children are in their 20s. I've got three in their 20s and one in their teens. I've got boys and girls. And from a very early age, even before they started going out, I had to inform them and make them aware that this happened. Buy bottles if you can. Always have your drink with you. But my daughter's been spiked a couple of times. She's been in circumstances where friends have looked after and that, but she's like spiked a couple of times. It could have been a terrible situation. So she tends to now. She'll always have a bottle. She'll always carry a bottle. But of course they should. It's also the horrible fact of, when you're having to say to my daughter, you've got to do this, or you don't say that to the boys. I'm like, yeah, but in an ideal world, but we don't live in an ideal world, Hen. There's monsters out there. Don't give a fuck. Same way your boys can get into so much trouble with fighting when they go out, and it's just being in the wrong time. Also, as well, you've got to keep them aware of. You don't know what's happening with people when they're out doing what they do.
Yeah.
Wandering into situations, especially for my boys. I'm like, look, if you see a young girl and she's drunk by herself, try and find a doorman, try and find a street pastor. Don't try and deal with it yourself, because you'll be in a situation where you're accused of something, and vice versa if it's a young lad. The girls, I've said to my daughter, don't get someone to help you. Don't do this by yourself.
Yeah.
They're very kind, caring people. Actually, my children, I'm quite lucky with that. But it's not an easy world out there for them at that age, and they should really be taught from a young age to be aware of it, to be aware of their own bodies as well, that they've consumed too much, or to be aware, actually, I don't like the situation that I'm in, and be able to have the confidence to voice it as well. Say, I'm out of here, I'm not dealing with you, and I'm not dealing with this. Or again, that comes back to a culture of silence where we don't call out the wrong one. Yeah. We won't say, actually, this person's up to that. This is right. This isn't right. And that goes from all across the board, from domestic violence to everything, where we just don't. We'd rather turn a blind eye to it. Yeah. And get, which is, we can't do that anymore, because it's such a huge problem. We can't do that. We're doing our fellow human beings a disservice to turn away, I think. Yeah. We have to look into each other. So this happened to you 4 years ago. How do you feel about that experience now? Has it changed, like, the way you look on life, how you are, maybe your views on your children? You did mention a bit about that before, but how do you feel about that experience now? I'm not as carefree as I was. That's for sure. I'm definitely, I never had a problem about going out myself. I never had a problem just having a pint by myself. Now I kind of, not all the time, it's not all the time, but I do have long periods of time where I do have quite high PTSD. I bad nightmares for a long time, bad dreams for a long time. And it's just made me more of a cold person. I feel more of used to be quite loving, quite open. Still loving and open. I'm still there, but I tend to be a bit harsher and brasher now, a wee bit. Definitely my confidence took a tumble, big tumble. Yeah. But I have times where I'm okay. I do have times where I'm okay. That brings me on to my last question. What advice have you got for people that might be listening, victims that might be afraid to come out, or maybe people that just want a bit more information on how to protect themselves against this? I would say speak out about it. Don't be quiet about it, and it's not your fault. No matter what situation you were in, I don't care if you were flying high as a kite and it happened to you. It's not your fault that happened to you. That's their fault. You can't blame yourself on it. You really can't blame yourself for monsters, And I would, as soon as it happens and you think it's happened to you, you need to go to the police. you need to get those blood tests, you need to get the urine sample, you need to do whatever they've got to do to actually prove it. And get a support system in place as well as a good one. Get hold of people like you, get hold of the spike aware groups, and get a support system in place of people who will believe you. You will believe your experience and take your experience on board and help you. And get some counselling.
Yeah.
Get some counselling on board, because you're going to need it. And even if you think you don't need it, you will at some point need it. And try not to get too angry.
Yeah.
Don't do crazy things like cutting all your hair off. But you're gonna be really angry and you're gonna want to lash out at the world. But it's not the world's fault, and it's not your fault either.
Well, on behalf of myself and Stamp Out Spiking, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for speaking out, because what you're doing is incredible and you should be really, really proud of yourself, because you've clearly come really far from it. And I know that it still affects you, but what you're doing is really, really helping protect other people and spread awareness, which is what we all need to do. So thank you so much for being here and talking today.
Oh, no problem. No, it's a pleasure. It's an honour as well to be asked to do it, to be honest. Yeah, thank you very much.
If you have been affected by the nature of this podcast and seeking help and support, then please visit our website at stampoutsbiking.org.